My playtesters were cheering for one of the players to beat them, and that was when I knew Push Your Luck was really special. During a game of Station Decimus, one of the players had fallen behind quite significantly. In the last mission, everyone else had returned to the safety of their ship and were counting their points. This player in last place, however, decided to push their luck that bit further. Not wanting to settle for last place, they kept going and kept racking up more points. They got to the point where they probably weren't last anymore. They may have been close to the winner, but they probably weren't winning. And they decided to push that bit further. Now they were in the realms of possibly winning, and everyone was excited to see what they did next. They explored again and survived again. They did this again and again until they exhausted every possible safe option there was in the deck before returning with a sweeping victory. When they did so, the other players were stood around the table cheering them on, waiting to see if the next encounter was going to finish them off or if they'd survive another round. And that was when I first realised just how special Push Your Luck can be as a mechanic. It can get everyone around the table rooting for someone, even in a competitive game. But first, what is Push Your Luck? Push Your Luck is exactly that kind of mechanic. The ones where you get to decide, do you want to try and go that bit further, roll another dice, reveal another card, or do you stick with what you've got? How far are you willing to push your luck? The further you go, the more rewards you'll get, but the higher the chances that you'll lose, often losing you everything you've done so far. That is the core mechanic of Push Your Luck, and one that I'm going to be exploring in this video. Some games which I think do a really great job of it, and some games which leave it feeling a little bit flat. I think there are two main features of Push Your Luck which make it a standout mechanic on the table. The first is that ability to unify everyone behind the table to cheer for a competitor. Everyone can see the odds on the table, they know how slim someone's chances are, and they egg them on to do it, and when they do it and succeed, the table can often erupt with laughter or enjoyment at that person's success. That person has beaten the odds, they've beaten the game more than they've beaten the other players, and everyone can really get behind that. The other thing that Push Your Luck does a really great job of is building anticipation and tension. There's often a pause between that decision to reveal another card or roll another dice and actually revealing the outcome. That brief moment where you've decided to push your luck that bit further but don't know whether or not it was the right call can be a great moment in a game and one which stands out in players' memory. Even if you make the wrong decision, that feeling just before you reveal is really great, and a bad outcome doesn't negate the fun you had along the way. Those moments are exactly the kind of thing I try and bring out in my game. After all, I believe that games are only there for that fun, and if I can create as many of those memorable moments as possible, then I'll have done my job. My first exposure to Push Your Luck games was Deep Sea Adventure by Oink, and when I first played it, I absolutely loved it. I'd never experienced Push Your Luck and that kind of tension before, and it was really enjoyable. However, the fun quickly wore off the more I played it, and I realised that I wasn't just pushing my luck, I was heavily dependent on what other players decided to do. Sometimes it felt like I had little to no choice at all, and the decision was pretty much made up for me. This is one of the key factors I think make Push Your Luck games really successful or feel a bit flat, is how much autonomy does the player have to push their own luck without the intervention of other players or outside factors. A player wants to lose in a Push Your Luck game and look back and think, oh, I shouldn't have pushed my luck there, that was a terrible decision, rather than, well, what other choice did I have? One other thing with Deep Sea Adventure is it has a really great core loop for pushing your luck, bar that other player intervention. However, that's kind of the extent of it. There isn't a lot of choice and you don't have a very large decision space to work with, which means that within the constraints of the game, you often feel like the game is happening to you rather than you are directly playing the game. Moving on to a game which I think does a really great job of Push Your Luck, Spots. So in Spots, you and the other players will take turns choosing a trick, which will allow you to gather treats or roll some dice and try and place them on your very cute Dalmatian cards with the corresponding spots on them. However, if you can't place all your dice, you will have to bury them in your doghouse. And if you bury too many pips, you will go bust and lose all of the points you've gathered so far. The player's choice as to which trick to take, how many dice to roll, whether to bury them or re-roll them, is really the core of the game, and it gives them full autonomy over what they do. They're not being influenced by the other players. One more thing this game does really well is it builds on that push your luck mechanic in other ways. So when you complete a dog card, it stays face up until you choose to score it and flip it over. This will, however, take a whole turn. Instead, a player can try and complete a trick which allows them to finish off all of their face-up dog cards in one go, and if they are successful, they will score all of those points immediately. However, doing so is a high-risk, high-reward strategy because the more cards you are trying to complete, the fewer spots you'll have remaining, and the higher the likelihood you're going to have to bury dice and risk going bust. This ability, combined with some of the tricks, can lead to some really great moments in the game where a player looks certain to lose, so they'll throw a Hail Mary, knowing that if they roll 8 dice, they will need all of the exact numbers on their dog cards to win, and they somehow pull it off by some miracle. Everyone will cheer, even the players that they've beaten, and it will be a memory that lasts long in the minds of everyone who was playing. I've had this happen against me before, and it was a very enjoyable game. Another implementation of Push Your Luck, Quacks of Quedlinburg, implements a bag building aspect where you're adding chips to a bag and then later drawing them to try and make potions. However, if you pull the wrong chips, you will go bust, your potion will explode, and that will be you out the round. It does, however, have some nice catch-up mechanics to stop you falling too far behind, but the bit of this game that I really wanted to emphasize is the bag building nature of it and how tactile and enjoyable this can be, where you reach into a bag and those moments where you're pulling out the chip but don't know yet what it's going to be are really satisfying. The components here are really emphasizing the game and the push your luck tension rather than detracting from it. Another very popular push your luck game at the moment is Flip 7. In this, players need to flip over 7 unique numbers. This looks like a really great entry point into Push Your Luck. However, the caveat here is I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but it's one I'm really excited to get to the table. It looks like it strips back a lot of the more complicated mechanics in larger games and really hones in on just that Push Your Luck nature. Something I hadn't considered with Push Your Luck games until a friend mentioned it to me is that they can be a really great way of getting younger audiences to the table, specifically small children. So while a small child playing a deeply tactical game is likely to lose more often than not to an experienced adult, Push Your Luck can work as a playing field leveler. The odds of the child winning are still quite low, but children have very different risk appetites to grown-ups. This can result in children taking actions where a grown-up is certain it's the wrong choice, only for them to pull out that 1 in 100 odds card and suddenly find themselves winning the game. This is actually something I've seen happen in Station Decimus, so everyone has returned because it looks like the odds of survival are very slim. A child decided to continue exploring, gathered more loot, and ended up wiping the table with all of us. So while they might not win very often, it can work as a really fun way of getting children into games. I also consider myself to be something of a people person and really enjoy interactions with other people around a gaming table. This is where Push Your Luck can give you some really interesting insights into the kind of risk appetites that your friends actually have and seeing how it plays out on a table. Why I find this so interesting is that sometimes it can be very different to what I expect, and you can learn a lot about the people you're sat around the table with. Without having actually played the game, I heard about a mechanic in Diamant or Incan Gold where players flip over cards until they hit 2 of the negative card, at which point they lose. This sounded like an interesting mechanic. I believe I was listening to one of Jamie Stegmaier's videos at the time, and I thought I'll add that to my playlist for later. I still haven't got round to it. However, that idea really stuck with me, and is something that I built into the core gameplay loop of Station Decimus. So while it works slightly differently in the odds and the number and types of cards that you can reveal, the core idea is the same. It creates a really nice visible display of how the odds are progressively getting worse as you reveal another face-up card every turn, without actually telling the players when it's safe to explore or not. What Station Decimus does, however, is build on top of that core loop and try and make every single other decision that you get to make in the game another case of risk versus reward. This can be in the initiative phase, where players are deciding to go at the very front or the very back of the initiative order, and choosing between the most lucrative place, where they'll be the first person into the next room, or the safest place, where they'll be the last person into the next room, picking up whatever scraps left over, but knowing that if something triggers to kill everyone, there's a good chance someone ahead of them will be able to save them first. Then moving on to the actions that you can take, these are all played by the items you find along the way. This means whenever you play an action card, you are costing yourselves the value of that card if you try and bank it for points later. Some of the items themselves are also risk versus reward. So the delivery drone lets you return some of the loot you found to safety, but costs you the points of that card, so you can hedge your bets if you think you might die in a future round. However, if you don't and you make it back to safety, you've just cost yourself those points for no real gain. Then the main encounter loop that I mentioned before, where you'll be flipping one of those cards every turn and deciding whether or not you want to explore again, try and gather some more loot, or if you're going to go back to the safety of your own ship. This is done simultaneously. Everyone places a card face down, and there's a real tension as everyone tries to work out what the other players who may be ahead of them in the initiative order are going to do, especially if they're relying on them to save them. Then everyone will reveal simultaneously, and the next encounter will be revealed. This is a really tense and interesting moment in the game, which tends to stand out for most players. If an encounter triggers and the players can't survive, they will die, losing all of the loot that they've gathered so far in that mission. However, in Station Decimus, you play across 4 missions. This means that, yes, you will lose a lot of points if you die on a mission, but you will not be out the game. This can actually magnify those moments of tension. If a player has fallen behind in an earlier round, their risk appetite will change as the missions go on. By the last mission, if they're playing catch-up, they're more likely to try and beat the odds and take some very dangerous decisions for the shot of winning. Conversely, players who are leading by some way will find their risk appetite changes significantly, and they're more likely to try and return early and take what few points they have with them. This can lead to some really interesting final missions in the game. One complaint sometimes levelled against push your luck games is that they can feel unfair. By their very nature, they'll have some randomness in them, and if you are particularly unlucky, you can find yourself being out of the game very early. Station Decimus tries to tackle this by making sure that the players are facing the same odds. The encounter deck, where you're revealing a card every turn, is shared amongst all the players. This means that, yes, you could get very unlucky and hit 2 deadly cards in a row at the start, killing you by round 2. But if you do, every other player around the table will have hit the same 2 encounters, and if they made the same choice as you, they will also be dying. These moments actually often stand out as some of the best moments people have playing the game. The alien card is the only unsurvivable encounter in the game, and there are 2 of them, meaning that when the second one is flipped face up, everyone who's still exploring will die. This means you can have an alien card in the first round, and an alien card in the second round, and die in round 2. This has actually happened several times and has been a real standout moment that has lived long in the memories of the people it's happened to. For example, at HandyCon, I've had players go out in round 2 and the whole table will burst into laughter. Everyone is thinking, surely the next card's not going to be an alien as well? And it is. Even better was the time where the first 2 missions both had the exact same start. Alien, alien, wiped out, and then another alien, at which point everyone was saying, surely we can't get double aliens twice in a row. The odds are so slim, it's never going to happen. We'll all explore, only to find another alien card. Again, bursting into laughter. Everyone had a great time and is a memory which is very fond with me. Going one step further, I've even had blind playtesters specifically call out when this has happened to them and saying how much they enjoyed the moment. This turns that really bad luck into a shared moment around the table which all the players can enjoy. So that's how it really tries to build on that core loop of games like Diamant and Incan Gold. And I've even had one BGG review pop up recently saying that the game is Diamant on steroids, which is exactly the kind of thing I was aiming for when I made it. Every decision in the game is designed to exaggerate that risk versus reward choice. And if you'd like to find out if you agree with that review, you can head over to my website and get a free print and play version of the game now. Push Your Luck works at its best when it puts the decision and your fate solely in your own hands, with enough decision space to make it interesting. More than that though, it can really bring together a table of people fighting the odds, even in a situation where they're playing against each other. And for me, those standout moments that it creates are really what makes it one of the best board game mechanics.